Good evening. Good evening, everyone. Welcome again to the last of our evenings of the Parish Mission. And before we begin, because I know towards the end, things kind of get rushed with everybody wanting to be good Catholics and get to their car quick. So I want to thank Andy for 3 nights of a very enjoyable, very spirit-filled, a very grace-filled time for our parish community. He put a lot of hard work and effort, especially into understanding best the La Salette connection with the Ignatian spirituality and combining them both together for us as a unique parish community. So Andy, I want to thank you very, very much for all that you've done. And you can be an official parishioner whenever you want. We'll send the envelopes. Anyway, and I also want to say thank you to Stephanie and to Anne-Marie and to Peggy, our Encounter team, for the hard work and effort and energy that they put into producing this great time for us all, for making sure that all the practicalities got done, for all the wonderful artwork that's out there with the tree, for the food, and especially the 3 nights of food. I want to especially thank Lynn Hodges, who tonight made all the chicken pot pie. So I want to thank her. That was great. And her husband, Bob, who cut all the potatoes up. Anyway, and I want to thank Ed and our musicians for leading us in music, prayer, praise, something we do really well here at St. Anne's for the 3 evenings. Thanks, Ed. And thank you all for taking the time during Lent to come and to cultivate your faith a little deeper and to help us, especially as a community, to bloom well for the Easter season to come. Remember, April 13th, Parish Beautification Day. You'll hear more about it, and we do need your help. God bless. Also, one more thing. I have to say this. Yeah. Tomorrow, I'm on Quest Radio for at 1 o'clock. If you want to hear me make a fool of myself, for an hour presentation on. I don't know what they're going to ask me, but 1 o'clock, 1160 Quest Radio. They're having a kind of a telephone-a-thon. Anyway, but God bless you. Thank you for coming. Glad you were here, and may God continue to bless us as a community of faith. Andy.
Well, many thanks to you, Father Ray, and Stephanie and Ed and the whole staff, and to you. This really is just such a warm and welcoming community. I feel like I've gotten a little bit closer each night, and that's a good sign. So let's start again in prayer, using an examined prayer. So again, let us quiet our hearts, close our eyes, remind ourselves that we are in the presence of God. Ignatius said we should always begin our prayer with gratitude. So I bring to mind one part of my life that I recognize as a gift from God. I see this thing with a heart full of gratitude. I now consider all the action moments of my life, the various things I do, the career I have, my volunteering or hobbies, my role as a parent or child or friend or mentor. I take special note of how these actions give life or help or goodness to others. When others see me, how do they see me living? How do they hear my words, my actions? What does it mean that I am a follower of Jesus Christ? In this last moment, I ask God to help me live an authentic life founded on love. Now, I open my eyes and raise my voice in song to our loving God.
Wait for the state, we're gathered in your name. We're stay, I'll stay. When you move, I'll move. I will follow you. Whom you love, I'll love. How you serve, I'll serve. If this life I lose, I will follow you. All your ways are good. All your ways are sure. I will trust in you alone. Higher than my sight, high above my life. I will trust in you alone. In you alone. Where you go, I'll go. Where you stay, I'll stay. When you move, I'll move. I will follow you. Who you love, I'll love. How you serve, I'll serve. If this life I lose, I will follow you. I will follow you. Right into the world, right into my life. I will live for you alone. You're the one I seek, knowing I will find all I need in you alone. In you alone. Where you go, I'll go. Where you stay, I'll stay. When you move, I'll move. I will follow you. Who you love, I'll love. How you serve, I'll serve. If this life I lose, I will follow you. I will follow you. In you there's life everlasting. In you there's freedom for my soul. In you there's joy, unending joy. I will follow. Where you go, I'll go. Where you stay, I'll stay. When you move, I'll move. I will follow you. Whom you love, I'll love. How you serve, I'll serve. If this life I lose, I will follow you. Where you go, I'll go. Where you stay, I'll stay. When you move, I'll move. I will follow you. Whom you love, I'll love. How you serve, I'll serve. If this life I lose, I will follow you. I will follow you. Where you go, I'll go. Where you stay, I'll stay. When you move, I'll move. I will follow you. Whom you love, I'll love. How you serve, I'll serve. If this life I lose, I will follow you.
I wanted to mention that, I forgot to mention this the other night, on the table, the Ignatius House table in the narthex, is a bookmark with the daily examine prayer. Now, we've started each evening with a variation on the examine for a particular theme, but traditionally you're reflecting on the presence of God in the last 24 hours. So feel free to take one of these home to enrich your daily prayer habit this Lent. So we began our mission reflecting on prayer as a way to focus our priorities and to sort of till the soil of our relationship with God and to grow in intimacy. And we reflected on the work of reconciliation, which is not just about sin, but about making right our relationships with God and all of creation. And this was the work of Jesus. healing, forgiving, bringing people together in love and friendship, promoting the work of human dignity. And if you still have an image of God as up there and we're the hired hand working in the garden alone, just taking orders from the landowner, well, it's maybe time to challenge that image. One blessing of the spirituality that comes from St. Ignatius is that it brings God down to earth, sees God as our co-laborer. We are co-laboring with God in the work of reconciling the world, of loving the world into wholeness. I imagine God and me kneeling down side by side in the dirt, messy, planting seeds, uprooting, watering. We're working together in this, God and me. So let's begin with another gardening metaphor from Matthew's Gospel. Listen, a sower went out to sow, and as he sowed, some seeds fell on the path, and the birds came and ate them up. Other seeds fell on rocky ground, where they did not have much soil, and they sprang up quickly, since they had no depth of soil. But when the sun rose, they were scorched, and since they had no root, they withered away. Other seeds fell among the thorns, and the thorns grew up and choked them. Other seeds fell on good soil and brought forth grain, some 100-fold, some 60, some 30. Let anyone with ears listen. Here, I think Jesus is teaching his disciples how to become apostles. And what's the difference? Disciples are followers. Right? The call to discipleship requires a radical shift in life. It's the initial moment of conversion where we drop our previous ways of being. It's when the Spirit gives us a new perspective, when we realize that there's wisdom in the words of Jesus. Discipleship is a good place to be because it's our first response as Christians. It's our first response to Christ's invitation. But then Jesus extends a deeper invitation to move from words and commandments to action. An apostle is one who is sent. We're no longer talking about the greatness of the good news, we're living it. We're no longer just talking about the virtues of the works of mercy. We're actually welcoming the stranger, caring for the sick, caring for the vulnerable and the stranger. And the apostolic stage of Christian life is not one-dimensional. It's a bold call to turn our words into actions and let our entire lives be apostolic. That is, letting our relationship with Christ affect how we live and move in the world. It's no surprise that Jesus' words of call radically shift from "follow me" at the beginning of the Gospels to "go, therefore, and make disciples of all nations." Jesus' disciples needed to grow with him and imitate him before they could be mature enough in their faith to go out on their own as apostles in his name. His initial call was followed with a promise for that deeper call to apostolic action. I will show you how to fish for people. That was his promise at the beginning. In La Salette, Mary asked the children to make her message, Jesus' message, known, to go out and share the gospel, to communicate the beautiful Christian way of life. And that's the Christian call, to go out, to get out. And for those who get caught up with the idea of Mass being an obligation, I say, you're focusing on the wrong thing. Is that why you go to Mass? Our encounter with God in liturgy, sacrament, and prayer is the tilling of the soil so that we can then go out, to be dismissed, to go out and to scatter the seed. We confuse the tilling with the planting. In the Joy of the Gospel, Pope Francis says, when evangelizers rise from prayer, their hearts are more open. Freed from self-absorption, they are desirous of doing good and sharing their lives with others. So back to the parable of the sower. Jesus is telling his friends what they can expect. They're going to encounter rocky ground, thorns, and good soil. When they're scattering seed, there will be rocky ground, those who have no root, and at the first sign of challenge, growth ceases. There will be thorns, which are those who are overtaken by the distractions of the world. Again, no growth happens. And then there will be good soil, those who listen and hear and understand the good news, and roots take hold and bear fruit. The garden is going to have difficult terrain to navigate. But how do we know how to navigate this terrain? How do we genuinely be evangelizers or apostolic without being a jerk? 3 things: prayer, appeal, and freedom. First, prayer. Francis again says, without prayer, all our activity risks being fruitless and our message empty. How can we scatter seeds if we ourselves don't have roots? How can we share God's love if we don't fully trust in it? We must be good soil first, not perfect soil. If catechists themselves don't have a solid spiritual foundation and loving relationship with God, how can they genuinely, authentically share the gospel with the children they're called to serve? If, as a parent, I don't cultivate and water my own garden, how am I going to teach my children to cultivate theirs? If a priest or lay minister doesn't know deeply Jesus Christ's radical love, how can they preach it to the people they minister to? Someone said to me the other day, how can you grow if you don't find time for contemplation, quiet, and solitude? When our focus is so much on action, we can go about our Christian lives haphazardly. But when we pause and remain quiet enough for long enough, we prayerfully settle into the context of our Christian lives. A God who wishes to share a redeeming love with all people. Let me repeat Francis's words. When evangelizers rise from prayer, their hearts are more open. Freed of self-absorption, they're desirous of doing good and sharing their lives with others. And since prayer is ultimately a connection with the other, it naturally draws us out of ourselves, right? It reminds us that our lives are bigger than our own egos. And we find that we are made to share our gifts and share our whole selves with the world. The Jesuits talk about the importance of being a contemplative in action. It means that prayer is necessary to the work of the kingdom. Prayer is ultimately apostolic. It affects what we do in the world. It should affect all we do. And hopefully it makes us humble. The other day I was talking to someone about how a certain Christian social justice organization made evangelization part of their mission. But it was the kind of evangelization that basically meant proselytizing. The good work that they did was primarily for the sake of making Christians, not for primarily the sake of the good work. Well, the Catholic perspective on caring for neighbor isn't about converting people. We love neighbor because that's what it means to be Catholic. When Jesus told his disciples to go out and baptize people of all nations, he wouldn't have understood baptism as admission to a new religion. Jesus didn't come to start a new religion. If you remember why John the Baptist baptized, it was a ritual call to conversion, a new way of living and being, a new way of loving. It was first and foremost a call to conversion, repentance, right? Which means change. Jesus was calling his disciples to be apostolic by word and witness. In sharing the gospel, they would be drawing people into the way. And that's what they would have referred to it as, the way. Not Christianity, but the way. The seeds planted, if good soil, would lead to a blooming conversion. But you need the humility that arises out of quiet prayer, so that being an apostle doesn't mean being a jerk trying to convert someone. You're simply sharing the gospel with love and affection for your sisters and brothers. So that's prayer. The second element is appeal. When we live our Christian lives, does it seem appealing? When people look at us, what do they see? How do they see Christianity as a whole? Catholicism, even. Do they see people who are robotic, unfree, going through the motions? Or do they see loving people who are living lives of joy and goodness? Here's an example of how important it is to make our way of life attractive. My wife Sarah used to work at Providence College in Rhode Island, which is run by the Dominicans. And she mentioned that there were some Dominican priests who said, "We don't have to impress women, so who cares if we get fat?" And this Dominican sister on staff scolded them for saying that. It didn't make their vocation look attractive. The reality is that religious life can be very joyful. I experienced that firsthand. Sarah and I run a marriage prep program at our parish, and we say the same thing about marriage. We have to make marriage look appealing. I once had a coworker who would often talk about marriage as being a ball and chain. He would say things like, happy wife, happy life. These kinds of phrases make the marriage commitment seem like a burden and all about pleasing the other to one's own discontent. And he was basically saying that he had to bow to all of his wife's wishes as if marriage stripped him of his personhood. And this was a guy who was a devout Catholic. He probably would have said he was quite pro-marriage, but I never once heard him say anything positive about marriage or about his wife. What kind of witness to marriage is that? Years ago, I had a girlfriend who was alive in her faith, and I would participate in her Bible study once a week. And the people I met there, they just seemed on fire with their faith. And you could tell it affected all they did. It gave them life. And at that point, my faith was just going to Mass more out of obligation than anything. But I wanted what they had. These people had helped till the soil and plant seeds that eventually moved me to discern and enter religious life. These people, they didn't do anything to try to convert me. They just showed me that Christianity was an appealing way of life. It was attractive. I heard a story about something that happened on a silent retreat. There was an Episcopalian woman who, during Mass, went up to receive communion. And another retreatant who was Catholic knew she wasn't Catholic, and so in the silence slipped her a note telling her that since she wasn't Catholic, she couldn't receive communion. Well, the woman didn't respond. And the next day, she went and she received communion again. Well, the other retreatant, incensed by this, wrote her another note that read, "When are you going to become Catholic?" And she wrote back, "Not today." When one is immediately met with judgment and confrontation, it does not look attractive. Now, I'm not here to comment on who can and cannot receive communion, but the Episcopalian woman's experience of the Catholic man was that he was a jerk. That was her first experience, and he certainly didn't make Catholicism look appealing, the way he went about admonishing her. So that's the importance of appeal. The final element of being apostolic and not being a jerk is freedom. For me, it was when Jesus told his apostles to go into a new town and share the good news with them. And if there were people who didn't welcome them or didn't wish to receive their message, to shake the dust from their feet and to move on. They didn't waste their time if they encountered rocky or thorny soil that wasn't quite ready yet to receive their message. And that was fine. Jesus never made anyone an enemy. He was free enough to move on. And this freedom of his was found in his passion and death on the cross. His way had political consequences. And it did for the rest of the disciples who were killed for the gospel as well. True commitment to the mission comes in the darkness of the cross. But there's freedom there. And the mission of sharing God's love sometimes falls on thorny soil. the soil that is filled with the things of the world. It's interesting that Jesus had a crown of thorns pressed onto his head. That crown represented the worldly things, unfreedoms, those things that brought him to the cross. On the La Salette crucifix, we see the symbol of the hammer, representing those worldly things that drove Jesus to his death. But then we see the other symbol of the pincers, which represent the love and freedom that comes when the pincers remove the nails. And we can see who stayed at the cross and who didn't. Being apostolic is not easy. Being committed to the mission is not easy. St. Ignatius, in his spiritual exercises, offers a meditation called the Call of the King, where he asks us to imagine an earthly leader, someone who's charismatic and has a great project to change the world, to overcome oppression and poverty and climate change and so on. And the leader has a specific role for you, where you can use your talents and gifts to make a real difference. And then you're asked to now imagine Christ as the one calling you to his project for the world. It's a beautiful and personal call. How can we not respond? Ignatius says, how could we not respond affirmatively to that? I used to teach high school theology, and I gave this meditation to my students in the form of an email that came from a passionate leader asking them to help change the world with them, and that there's a specific role set aside for them. And then I asked my students how they'd respond. Now, most of them responded positively for the call to help, but some were more resistant. Here's one of their responses. Dear passionate leader, have you lost your mind? Unless you have an army of people and the billions of dollars it would take to fund this, everything you're saying sounds like a utopian fantasy. In addition, how on earth am I supposed to do anything? I'm 15. I have a 10th grade education. Now, many of us, might be hesitant to respond to such a call. And the more I read my students' responses, I found three main reasons why one would not respond to such a call. And the first is, it's too big a job. Like that student said, bringing world peace and stopping violence and oppression is just too unrealistic. It's a utopian fantasy. Well, trying to do the seemingly impossible stops a lot of people from pursuing dreams big and small. But Jesus told his disciples, for God, all things are possible. And this is God's project. It's true that bringing peace and justice to the world seems unrealistic when humans are so fallible and tempted to sin. But we know hearts are capable of change. People desire love and goodness. Deeply, they do. The disciples' ministry to different parts of the world changed hearts and minds, brought communities together, empowered others to continue this mission. It may also seem unlikely that I can help. I certainly can't make a difference. Well, if we all say this, then no difference will be made. Yet Jesus called a group of people who may have seemed so plain and boring to themselves that they too may have asked that question. What's so special, though, about the call of the King is that God seeks to use our unique gifts. There is a specific role, no matter how small, for us. Right? We're all different parts of the body, different functions that make up the whole. And these gifts that we have are required for the body to achieve its end, to achieve its purpose. It's unfair to assume that our unique ability or gift or skill can't make an important contribution to the whole project. We need to ask ourselves, what am I good at? What are the seeds I can plant? The second reason someone might be hesitant to respond to the call of Christ is, I don't want to give up what I have. Now, the Christian way of life does require a lot of sacrifice. But if we want to be part of this mission, we can't be complacent. And too often we are. I mean, Jesus asked his disciples to give up their family, their possessions, their former way of life. It was radical, but the call of Christ for us often means doing the mission in the context we already find ourselves in. At work, at home, among friends and strangers, in our communities. It requires the commitment of time and the sacrifice for other things that call for our attention, the thorns. The third reason someone might be hesitant to the call is the question of, what do I get out of it? One of my students wrote in response to the email, if I'm going to devote so much time and energy to this cause, I need to know what's in it for me. Do I get money or spiritual wealth? Well, right after Jesus told his friends that all things were possible with God, our good friend Peter butts in and says, we've given up everything and followed you. What will there be for us? Oh, Peter. Jesus replies, amen, I say to you that you who have followed me in the new age, when the Son of Man is seated on his throne of glory, will yourselves sit on 12 thrones, judging the 12 tribes of Israel, and everyone who has given up houses or brothers or sisters or father or mother or children or lands for the sake of my name will receive 100 times more and will inherit eternal life. But such an intangible kind of wealth that we have to wait for is not a reason enough for some to commit to Christ's cause. So I invite us now to sit and reflect on our own response and our own resistance.
Brothers, let us come together, walking in the Spirit.
So now I invite you to reflect on a few questions that are on your handout. How does prayer affect the way I live my life as a Christian? Do I make this way of life appealing? Where's the freedom in my life with that? And then what excuses do I make for not being apostolic? So we'll have some conversation for a few minutes and then get back together. Okay, there it's working. Maybe we can start wrapping up. All right, apostolic zeal. Anybody feel moved to share an insight that stirred for you, something that came up for you? Yeah.
I happen to be in a pew with two other people who share my same profession. We've all been teachers. And when I heard you speak, I saw that my mission, my profession, my vocation, and theirs has always been to plant the seed. And we have seen the seed that has taken, the one that did not, the ones who eventually maybe took a little bit, but we never saw it too big, because when we taught one child at a time. And so I think that being in that vocation and in that profession made it perhaps easier for us to understand the mission.
Thank you. Yes. Thank you to all teachers for that ministry. The thing is, I guess, and it's even just in ministry in general, is planting the seed. Sometimes you don't see the growth, or you can't control the garden, right? You do what you can do. You have to have freedom in that. Yeah. Who else?
Well, I'm one of those people that probably doesn't need a microphone. I just think that it was an interesting 3 nights, because it's so infrequent in today's society that we truly pause. And I know for me, it was 3 great pausing evenings to listen and to note and to grow. And I'm grateful for that, so thank you.
Thank you, yeah. Of course, the invitation is go out, get out of here, and do the thing, you know. All right. Yeah. What else came up around being apostolic, being sent? Easy, hard, resistance. I could just keep talking. I want to hear from you. I'll come to you next.
Hi.
Hey.
Hi, our group got as far as question 2, but all of us kind of agreed that when it comes to the prayer portion of it, it kind of slows down the mind clutter, kind of puts us present, and they were sharing minute by minute. It's not, sometimes it can be overwhelming if we think about, are we holy, are we, up here? But if we just kind of come zero in the moment, in the present, share, and, everybody shared a different, what they do to kind of connect, start the day off like that. And I thought that was really, putting the seed out from the get-go, and then move forward for the remaining portion of the day with that. So,
Yeah. Prayer is a grounding and centering. I'll lick it. There. Can I walk through here? Sorry.
So I had a lovely conversation with someone that I had never met before, and we were stuck on question number 3, around am I free to scatter the seed and shake the dust from my feet when I need to? And what we talked about was the freedom that we have in the U.S., to be so blessed for that, to be able to worship, but then the internal bondage that kind of prevents us from making choices or doing things. And then we got to the topic of gifts and just struggling with really knowing what are our gifts. And so that was just our conversation, and a great place for us to be.
Thank you for that. Yeah, lots of gifts that even might just take time to uncover, to realize. Yeah. One more? Sorry, where?
The word appeal just came out in my mind as we went through the talk. And in everything we do, whether it's this church or our jobs or our community life in our neighborhoods, it's that we have to be appealing. And we were talking real estate agents over here, curb appeal. I mean, it is. We have to have curb appeal. So in everything we do, and to be hospitable and to bring people into our church, it's got to be appealing. So I love the word appeal.
Yeah, amen to that. It's funny because we're in the middle of, we're under contract for a house, and it's it's a little bit of hell. Yeah. So there's this lyric in a song by Tony Alonso, the song called Fresh is the Morning. And this lyric that I love says, chosen as partners, midwives of justice, birthing new systems, lighting new lights. What a beautiful image of something new blooming. Our Christian way of life being apostolic, bringing people together in peace, bringing the light of Christ to the world. In Mark chapter 15, Jesus says, go into all the world and proclaim the good news to the whole creation. The whole creation. Being apostolic doesn't mean that we are the answer to the world. That's not very humble. Rather, we are midwives, facilitating the birth, the growth, the transformation of all creation. Not just humans, all God's creation. And the invitation is always to co-labor, collaborate with God in this ongoing unfolding of creation. Creation didn't stop at the end of the sixth day. It's ongoing. And I love the subtitle for this mission, Dig Deep and Bloom. Right, we're not digging into parched soil. We're digging into the rich soil of God, sowing the seeds that leads to joy in life with God. Life in God. That's all that's being offered. Life in God. And we take on this apostolic mission in humble ways, at our workplaces, at home, with strangers, with friends. Are you generous and kind to your customers or colleagues? Does your work give life or goodness in some way to others? How do you support and encourage the gifts of your spouse? What do you do when you encounter someone experiencing homelessness, or someone who is sick, or someone who lost a loved one? How are you bringing generous love to these people? Apostolic zeal should always be grounded in the joy of the gospel. As I said before, do we make the gospel appealing to others? Do we live lives of joy that others witness? For too long, Catholicism, for one, has been seen as a joyless tradition, about obligations and guilt and stoic nuns hitting knuckles. It's been seen as one of scandal and abuse and self-protection and power. It's been about getting myself to heaven rather than seeing salvation as a path of joy and love. For some, it has lost moral credibility. This is because the joy of the gospel has not been our blueprint for Christian living. We have been more distracted by the thorns of the world rather than the good soil around us. We've lost the playfulness of spirituality and the belief that we are an Easter people. Over and over and over again, Jesus said to the rigid and joyless, "Woe to you." Where is your focus? Jesus asks. For which is greater, the gold or the sanctuary that has made the gold sacred? Jesus says. For which is greater, the gift or the altar that makes the gift sacred? Have we lost sight of the gift? In our witness to the Christian way, are we sharing the altar or the gift? This is not my idea, but Jesus's. Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, for you tithe, but have neglected the weightier matters of the law, justice, mercy, and faith. Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, for you clean the outside of the cup and of the plate, but the inside are full of greed and self-indulgence. The joy of the gospel has no woes. Co-laboring with God in the vineyard may be difficult, but it does not lack joy. Such laboring is humble work. It's the little ways that fill up hearts with the love of God, that lead people nearer to the people God made them to be. I love being a Christ follower. I love being Catholic. I love being part of a tradition and community that is, at its core, its truest self, joy-filled, gospel living, apostolically zealous, compassionately forgiving, and generously loving. It's because our God is joy-giving, compassionate, reconciling, and generous. This season does not have to be absent of joy. Lent is a time of refocusing, reprioritizing, rejoying, reconciling, which means to bring together again. It's a resetting of our spirits in God's Spirit and the spirits of our sisters and brothers sitting around here tonight and elsewhere. It's a renewing, a making new again. All this is preparation so we can truly be an Easter people of joy, love, and generosity. Let our prayer tonight be our song.
This is a song that we know well, that we've sung many times in liturgy here. A song that calls us to reflect on our calling. same love that set the captives free, the same love that opened eyes to see is calling us all by name. You are calling us all by name. The same God that spread the heavens wide, the same God that was crucified is calling us all by name. You are calling us all by name. You take the faith as one aside and speak the words, you are mine. You call the cynic and the proud. Come to me now. The same love that set the captives free, the same love that opened eyes to see is calling us all by name. You are calling us all by name. Yeah, the same God that spread the heavens wide, the same God that was crucified is calling us all by name. You are calling us all by name. You're calling, you're calling, you're calling us to the cross. You're calling, you're calling, you're calling us to the cross. You're calling, you're calling, you're calling us to the cross. You're calling, you're calling, you're calling us to the cross. The same love that set the captives free, the same love that opened eyes to see is calling us all by name. You are calling us all by name. Oh, the same God that spread the heavens wide, the same God that was crucified is calling us all by name. You are calling us all by name. Amen. All right, now we're gonna do one more song. I'm gonna ask you to please stand. We sang this song together at Mass for two weekends in a row, I think. Unless you went to Mass on Saturday, because it's just a piano. So. It's called Hold Us Together, and it's about love. The whole song's about love. You don't have a job, it don't pay your bills, it won't buy you a home in Beverly Hills. It won't fix your life in 5 easy steps. Ain't the law of the land or the government, but it's all you need, come on. But it's all you need. Love will hold us together, make us a shelter to weather the storm, and I'll be think we're done. All right. See you on go. Yeah, he says go out and do that thing. Do the thing.